So here we are on a Monday afternoon, and Pat McGart is fit and raring to go. How are you, Pat?
I'm grand, Jude.
Sunny Donegal.
Say again?
Sunny Donegal.
It actually is. This morning it was torrential rain, but it's actually cleared up. It's actually quite, and it's warm, Jude. It's sort of, what do you call that? Sort of close, as my mother used to call it.
Very close. Very close.
It's very close. It's a term you don't hear much used now, but it is actually.
Is that a Donegalism? I wonder.
I think it is actually. You had a whole host of. I was watching but I wasn't Sam. Somebody was a collector. Sam Henry. I was watching a program on RT last night about he was a collector of songs and poetry and all the rest of it. And all those old Ulster saying, my mother had a whole host of them. Like, when she was sweeping the floor, she says, "What's that bosom?" And it's a word I've never come across really since. But that's just side issue.
I heard that as well. Yeah. My mother used to talk about fairings. She'd go to the town, she'd bring us back some fairings. You ever hear that?
I vaguely, but don't even know what it is.
Yeah. Well, I think if it's an Irish word for present, but it was actually, we were talking about sweets,
Yeah.
Bring us any sweet. Oh, okay. So let's turn to business here quickly because we've got a limited time, thanks to Mr. Zoom cutting back a bit. First item on the agenda you want to talk about, Pat, is Boris being back in town. And how could you possibly ignore somebody like Boris? And is there anything good going to come out of his visit?
Hold on, Dr. Collins. I'll ask you. Do you think there's any good going to come out of it?
No, Boris is here for his own purposes. It's actually that I don't think he plans to achieve anything. I mean, if you think about it, what is it that he would say to anybody that he wouldn't be able to say to them over the telephone or in a video call? It's like the congressmen from America coming to Ireland. It's to emphasize that they are playing an active role and they are concerned for what's happening. Boris is here for the same reason, I think. The other thing that sort of gets me is he's coming over and talking as if, the majority of people here were really in a bad way about this protocol. And that's not true. That's not getting him back. Anyway, that's my thoughts. I can say more, but I'll let you go on now.
No, Jude, there's, I watch, due to my incapacity over the weekend, I was somewhat confined. And on Friday, I was sitting watching the news bulletins one after another. And there's something about it. Last Tuesday, I think it was, Jude, I was watching Newsline on BBC, and then McClafferty, the political editor, was talking to Sir Geoffrey Donaldson. And Geoffrey looked quite smug about something, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And then towards the end of it, Enda says, "Do you know something that we don't?" And I'm not, whatever he said, I'm not making any. Anyway, come Friday, suddenly they pulled the plug not only on the speaker, but the whole assembly. And I have very little doubt that Boris and the DUP are in this together, that it was coordinated and so on. And Jude, this thought has struck me. I notice, I've seen it on social media and I've talked to a few people. There's a growing sense of anger. I know by the way, it's bubbling on this in the nationalist community, that every time the nationalists seem to win something, the goalposts get changed so they can't win the game. And on Friday, suddenly, not only do we not have a speaker, we don't have an assembly. And what's the message going out? Oh, so the Sinn Féin were going to be the biggest party. They were going to take the First Minister's seat, and symbolically the unions changed the goalpost again, so it can't happen. Now 53 out of the 90 assembly members are willing to either A, work, or B, accept and work with the protocol. And a protocol, by the way, that has nothing to do with the Northern Ireland Assembly. It's between Westminster and Brussels. So I don't see why they couldn't go ahead. It's up to the Unionists to convince Boris Johnson and the EU to change the protocol, not the Northern Ireland Assembly. So those things seem a very cynical exercise to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it's going to change any minds. Nothing he says is going to change anybody's mind, Alliance, Sinn Féin, SDLP, anybody else. But I read where there was no less than 14 business bodies throughout the North. Now we're talking about things like the CBI, Northern Ireland Food and Drink Association, the Ulster Farmers Union, Ulster Farmers Union, Manufacturing NI, Hospitality Ulster, etc. All of these wrote to him and said, look, there's a prospect that we can deal with the EU. We'll work out something around this protocol. But Boris, I think the last they heard from either Boris or Truss was last January. So the obvious people he should be engaging in it, but this is a business difficulty, as they the DUP claim. Then definitely should be meeting with business people and find out, is that true?
I get the impression half the time that the Tory party in London and England, sorry, are just using Northern Ireland for their own ends. Yeah. There's a big game getting played about the old deal between the EU. They want to open this various other fronts to get negotiations going. Boris Johnson signed a deal to one, and I'm beating myself for about the 50th time over this past year, where he said he had an oven ready deal, and unlike the Labour Party, and he signed the deal. Look, I've signed the deal. And he wants an 83-seat majority. Then comes back and says, by the way, it wasn't a good deal. By the way, I think it was in the Telegraph on Saturday. There was all sorts of pretexts and excuses made on his behalf in the leader columns and so on. But the bottom line is I get the impression that unions are getting played here for a bigger game in London. And I really genuinely wonder, how much does Boris Johnson really care about what happens in Northern Ireland? And as long as there isn't an outbreak of war, he's happy enough.
Why do you think Johnson is going on about this, the protocol, and preparing to pass laws or at least to draft legislation to simply not abide by it? Why do you think he's doing that? Is it that he's concerned about the amount of trade going from Britain to Northern Ireland?
Yeah, I think it's more. Jude, I think it's more to keep the ERG group happy than it's all about the union, and he's got a real right-wing rump. The old colonels and so on. And these guys think Britain, is back in the old days. And in fact, the hardline, Ben Habib, by the way, must have a permanent on talkback. Yeah. It was a complete Looney Tune performance today. But anyway, these sort of guys simply think that only people that matter, and that this is sort of one congruent sort of organization, the UK. It's made up and it's in perpetuity of England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. No, it's not. So the last election, this is quite clearly that, and you quoted figures, I think, in your column yesterday or the day before, where it shows clearly there's a significant change. The voting numbers for nationalists at the last election were 17,000 up, and for unions 10,000 down.
It's hard to argue with those figures.
Things have changed.
The business of it all, of course, is that for the DUP anyway, they're saying that we will not be treated differently from any other part of the UK. Yeah. But I mean, for a start, for 50 years they had a parliament with no other part of the UK except, the national parliament in Westminster existed. Yeah. Scotland didn't have a parliament, Wales didn't have a parliament, but Northern Ireland had a parliament, so they could misrule for 50 years.
Yeah.
Secondly, there's nowhere else in the UK that has an agreement that if a majority decide to vote that they want to leave the union, that they can do it. Boris is saying, no, he's not going to give it okay to Scotland. Yeah. Wales doesn't do that. It's all written down in black and white that this can happen. So clearly, if the unionists can live with that, what are they talking about that they're being treated differently in terms of the protocol, which, as many business people, and I think you've pointed out as well, it's good for them. It's to their advantage, not to their disadvantage.
Yeah, but this thing that the protocol, it's the be all and end all. The nationalist people had to live with the fact that, by the way, I loved some months back, Jeffrey Donaldson come out. He obviously doesn't do irony. He says there's no way the unionist people can live with a border between Britain and Ireland, or between Britain and the province. So, we've had to live with one for over 101 years. Yeah. Secondly, people seem to forget, it was the Brexit as the progenitor of all this, and Brexit for the nationalist people, they've had to put up with Brexit and so on. So, like, the protocol is there. And by the way, and me and you're going to argue about this, but I'm not going to bother because you're going to do it anyway. About this constitutional position. Brexit, the protocol does not change the constitution until the day and hour that there's an election held north and south. The constitutional position doesn't change, and everybody can spend all day saying that. But until that day happens, it might change the tenor and the tone of the whole setup here. But until that happens, it doesn't. So, Jude, the protocol can be amended, it can be smoothed out, and it can be made. And they know where the landing zone is. To repeat myself again, that if the goods come into Northern Ireland from Britain, that are to remain in Northern Ireland, should be no checks. The ones that are going on to the Republic and therefore into the single market in the EU, they will be checked. Surely it's not that difficult to get that agreement.
Well, I mean, that might in practice be a wee bit difficult, actually. I
It
mean,
might be, but
how would you
that's
decide? How would you decide which were intended for the south
yeah.
and which were intended for the north? Like somebody
Well,
could say,
they say there's going to have to be some sort of system where it's like I think we mentioned it before, like the customs channels are the customs at posts at the airport. If you're an EU citizen, you go through the green light, and if you're you go through the red one. And the goods, the manufacturers in Britain will have to be clearly marked, and obviously at some stage there'll be random checks to ensure, and anybody's caught doing something that will be either fined or imprisoned or whatever.
Yeah. Well, now to be fair, I think the EU would want to fairly. I don't think they'd
the problem for the EU, Jude, and everybody says they're stickler for detail. The problem is there are 27 countries involved, so they can't be that flexible. They have to get 27 people to agree it.
They'd have to keep their eye on that. I mean, that idea of saying, "Well, mark this is for Northern Ireland," so that it's through. A wee bit. I think you want something a wee bit more rigorous than that. But the other thing that still puzzles me, and that doesn't puzzle me. I have a shrewd idea why. Boris, I think, is making this whole thing about the protocol, the whole thing about this is the UK versus the EU. I think that's to present himself as a champion, just as he presents himself as a champion in terms of the Ukraine. It's Churchill stuff again. And if he does that, then all the other stuff he gets up to with parties and God knows what, he can get away with it. Lies in Parliament, anything you want to mention.
But here's the point. He won an 83-seat majority on the basis of having a big row with the EU, and that he was the British bulldog standing up for Sure, Jude, he won seats in Labour heartlands because he appealed to the very thing that and the Labour heartlands in the north, where there's a lot of immigrants, places like Bradford and Leeds and all, which had been for years Labour mining territory up in Newcastle. Suddenly, these people are voting Tory. They're voting Tory because their lives they've been left behind, and because they see immigrants coming in. They see their schools overrun by people of different colours, and their schools been changed and their education system been overrun. And he appealed to all of that, and that's how he got himself elected. What's to stop him doing another big round saying, "Look, here I'm moving Northern Ireland, standing up for the British bulldog spirit. We will not be told by Johnny Foreigner what to do." Dude, it's a great strategy.
It's straight out of Colonel Blimp.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we've kicked Boris. No, we haven't kicked him enough. You couldn't possibly kick Boris enough. But we'll move on to the next topic, which is very closely related. And you're asking, is there any merit in the claims by the DUP that if Sinn Féin could bring down the Assembly 3 years ago, more than 3 years ago now, 2017, why are nationalists now up in arms about them doing it? Is that a fair comparison to make? I mean, 2017.
I've heard. In fact, what do you call it? Doug Beattie got up the last day in Assembly and that, and I'm saying it's a total false comparison. Absolutely, Martin McGuinness didn't bring it down for personal nationalists gain, not in the least. There was nothing for nationalism to gain bringing it down the last time, and they weren't doing it to spoil or spite unionism. There was 570 million, if I remember correctly, missing on a renewable heating initiative that was ongoing. There was nobody had been held accountable. It was affecting the budget for schools. The British government saying they weren't picking up the tab. It was affecting health services, schools. It was done for legitimate political reasons, not partisan reasons or community identity politics reasons. There's a massive big difference. And by the way, Martin McGuinness didn't go out to bring it down. He asked that Arlene Foster step aside for a couple of weeks so the thing could be properly investigated. On Friday, I thought it was. By the way,
the point you have to add to that, she said she wouldn't do anything of the sort. That's what tipped it over the edge.
Yeah, exactly. But I thought Friday was disgraceful, Jude. It was a total denial of democracy. The rights of 53 elected members are being totally ignored by 37. Is that my maths? It is. In other words, and the British government seemed lockstep with them. Jude, I don't buy for a second. I think the Tory, or certain elements at the very least of the Tory party, were up to their eyeballs with the DUP, pulling this stunt because they think this, the EU is affecting the stability of Northern Ireland and the peace process. And that I think it was all planned. I'm not big into conspiracy theories, but when I started to think about it, and I remembered Jeffrey Smug Look and Andy McLafferty asked him, "Do you know something, or is there something coming down the track?" And wait and see type thing. He said, So there you go.
But you see, it has its roots, at least partly, in the fact that unionism has been so used and made such a fetish out of being first minister, that this has come as an awful shock to the system. Not a shock in the sense of a surprise, but it's like, seeing a bomb coming towards you, and that doesn't make it any better when it hits you. The same thing applies there. I think they knew the tide was turning, and it still hurt them so much. The very idea of going into an assembly where the first minister would be a Sinn Féiner is very, very hard. I sort of understand that in a way, but I still come down to this. For them to make that comparison, I'd completely agree with you, that for them to make that comparison between 2017 and this instance of pulling down the assembly, there really is no comparison. I was trying to think of a parallel, and I was thinking, it's a bit like the difference between in a car and the call goes out, stop the car, because the driver is getting pains in his chest, or saying, stop the car, because I want to go out and look at that little daisy that's on the side of the road there. In one case, it's just really the same
one
thing.
One case is legitimate, the other one isn't.
Exactly. One makes sense and the other
doesn't.
But
one thing too, to cut across you, and just because I think you mentioned in your blog, I was reading it earlier on. Stephen Grimison, the former BBC guy, said at the previous, as was 2019 or 2017, can't remember the last assembly election, he said there was a big hoo-ha and a big sort of Sinn Féin is only 1,200 votes behind the DUP. This time, how many votes were they ahead of him? 50,000 or something? And he says, that's the definition of seismic. But Jude, the other thing, isn't it? Now, you used the figures, and I'm trying. Total nationalist vote was something like 351,000. Total national or unionist vote was 349. Jude, that is seismic. No matter what, the unionist vote is down 10,000. The nationalist vote is up 17,000. The nationalists, for the first ever in the 101-year history of Northern Ireland, are the largest grouping. They're the largest party, and suddenly last Friday we don't have an assembly.
It's interesting that the didn't and haven't done, the DUP and unionists generally. Doug Beattie has sort of half tried. They haven't done the one thing that could be good for them, and that is to be nice to the nationalists and get them to, although they might be bigger numbers, they'd be happy enough to stay in within the union. I'm thinking that maybe what the opportunity was there for unionism to be a human face has been picked up quickly by Alliance. And Alliance is essentially getting those votes.
Exactly.
And I suppose in a way the unionists are sort of those unionists who have joined or voted for the Alliance Party. Maybe they're thinking, yes, this will be a way of us keeping the nationalists or the Catholics reasonably happy.
By the way, Jude, were you listening to Talk Back today?
I heard about it. Ben Habib guy. I couldn't believe him.
No, but I'm moving on to John Alistair. Let me please his
I didn't hear Alistair, thank God.
Alistair, he came out with a brilliant line. He said that if the choice was Stephen, William Crawley asked him, he says, you're obviously very much in favour of direct rule. He says, if the choice is between being ruled by Sinn Féin or the Westminster, I am opting for Westminster. In other words, whatever happened to democracy in Northern Ireland? So in other words, he's basically saying the minute we stop being in control, so he let the democracy cat out of the bag. Jude, there's so much going on. And by the way, Jude, let me say this, and I've seen it a couple of times. Over the weekend, there is a serious anger. I've seen it a lot on social media from non-hardline Republican types, ordinary nationalists who are saying, wait a minute, what's going on here?
Well, I would agree with that completely. And I think all the parties are ranged very solidly. I mean, Naomi Long came out with a very strong statement. She was the strongest statement of them all against what the DUP were trying to play. But at the same time, I have a wee sort of a sneaking sympathy for them, because I think if I was in their shoes, I might be shouting a bit too. Look, if you've been for 100 years, if the state was set up for you to be the top dog, and you've been the top dog essentially for the last 100 years, it's hard. It's hard to turn around and say, no, we're not top dog anymore. Britain had the same problem actually when it lost its empire. It was trying to figure out what the hell are we, what are we supposed to be in the world? And I think that unionism is suffering from that, and it's kind of understandable. The other thing is, of course, that whether we like it or not, the Republican tradition has got a violent strain, and the violence of the Troubles preceded the present assembly. And for many in the Unionist community, what you had was a bunch of Republicans killing and maiming and murdering, and then having done that, saying, oh, we're going to stop doing that. Aren't we really great? And then they step into politics. And what has happened? Oh my God, they're now taking us over peacefully. So just there's a terrible feeling, I would imagine, among them. It must be very hard, a feeling almost of despair. Nothing works.
Yeah, and then the other side, look, and I know you're not, but you're playing devil's advocate there. But there was a northern state set up with a massive majority that discriminated, segregated, discriminated for 50 years. They had a police force and a nationalist committee, and there was sectarian murder upon sectarian murder. There was a police force that was up to its eyeballs. There was collusion. There was murder squads by loyalists. So both sides, Jude, this last 30 years since the Good Friday Agreement, and there's a lot of Sinn Féin people today who have nothing whatever to do with the campaign of violence and so on. And it's long, and every Sinner I meet says, look, that's all gone. It's in the past. It's 30, 40 years ago. Dude, we're living today. And the reality is, by the way, you used the word that they haven't learned to be nice to nationalists. They don't have to be nice to nationalists. What they have to do is be fair and equal. And so far, there's no sign of generosity. There's no sign of saying, right, look, if we want to live on this place under quote unquote British rule, here's the deal. There's no sign of this generosity. Everything has to be, as far as many nationalists are concerned, has to be taken banging and screaming and screeching. Like even Jude, the things like the Irish language, like it doesn't even affect them and they still won't give it.
Yeah, and I heard that they said, oh, well, Sinn Féin First Minister Michelle O'Neill had used the words Northern Ireland. And that was counterbalanced by this, one of the Republicans
reading
a speech in Irish.
Irish. Hey, Jude, the native language of this place. And by the way, and I think the Michelle O'Neill saying Northern Ireland was just bagged and sort of like there's somebody had stood up and said, thank you for using that term. Wouldn't it have? You get a lot more with honey than vinegar.
True. But I don't think that's in the nature of the DUP, which is their tragic flaw. It's a really core flaw. That one thing, before we move on to the next thing, I was thinking, what is Boris planning to do? He seems to be, I read a thing said he wasn't going to go with Article 16 because that allows you within the terms of the withdrawal agreement to freeze any aspect of it that's really troublesome. But he hasn't decided to go with that. He's decided to go with British legislation. So Liz Truss will be drawing up legislation to simply ignore the agreement they came to, or aspects of the agreement relating to the protocol. But that legislation she's drawing up may not come into effect for another year.
Yeah.
If that's the case, I tell you, if I was a unionist and relying on that, I'd be really, really worried. What happen next year?
Well, Jude, you've just asked the question I was going to sort of half ask as well. Jeffrey has said he will not go in based on words alone. There has to be action. So if they take, as you suggest, they go down, and I presume, Jude, they can't gut the whole thing totally, but they will be certainly taking out key aspects of it, or taking paragraphs out of that agreement, whatever the hell it is they're going to do. Well, if that's the case, and then say it'll take a year for it to come into action for the law to get passed, and I presume it could be had a lot of problems in the Lords. So do we, for 9 months, do we have nothing at Stormont?
Well, here's a last point. We shouldn't have gone back to that, really.
No, but
if in fact that's what happens, I don't know if you could say, well, Jeffrey will have the good. Can you still see me, Pat?
Yeah, you have 9:51.
But I've lost where I was on this. Hold on a second now to pull this. There's something coming in my way between me and you. Here we are. If a year goes by, the Unionists could say, oh, well, that's great. Now we will have a good excuse for not going in and serving as Deputy First Minister.
Yeah.
What they wouldn't have calculated on, I suspect, would be the seething anger that will have grown up and bubbled up and boiled up to such a point that everybody here that isn't a dyed-in-the-wool Unionist will be going absolutely apeshit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Furious. If they're mad now, they'd be absolutely.
The worst health crisis is not, as I said the last day, in the Republic. It's not in mainland Britain. It's in Northern Ireland. The cost of living in Northern Ireland is gone way up, and it's nothing to do with Brexit and about all the rest of it. The education system, there's a whole lot of things need, so on. So, Jude, bread and butter right now is far more important than even a lot of unionists than the protocol.
Well, yeah, I quite agree. Well, why wouldn't it? For God's sake, they're half sane. Of course it would. Okay, let's go on to the next item, which is Finland and Sweden. You're saying they're maybe poking the Russian bear when they are talking about joining NATO. Putting it like that, Pat, that suggests that they're doing it kind of deliberately and maybe.
No, Jude, I actually, it was a rhetorical. It wasn't a rhetorical question. It was a question I would put to you. Do you think they're poking the Russian bear is well away, or are they been careful about their own security? As it sort of saying, hey, wait a minute, this is action we need to take to protect ourselves.
I think whatever the reason is, and I think that last one may be it, that they see it as their security, that they're going to put their lot in with NATO. There's an argument for that, and I remember somebody saying that, well, if you've got a bully in the playground, then you've got to get as many people as possible together to oppose this. There's no other way. If you remain out of it, it's worse. And it's kind of cowardly. The implication was, if you don't join that group because you're going to depend on that group for getting you safety from this bully. So that's one way of looking at it. Two things. One is, this isn't as simple as we've agreed in the past. Isn't as simple as Putin coming and being a bad boy and doing all these things. It's more complicated than that, and it's got to do with NATO not being right on the doorstep of Russia. And the second thing is this, Pat, because Ireland's the next, south of Ireland's the next thing.
No, well, that was actually the question I should have really put down. If Sweden and Finland are going, Jude, what about Ireland?
Well, why? I'll tell you the truth. I think it's kind of shameful. I really do think it's kind of shameful that Finland and Sweden should have sort of said the only answer to these things is to get guns and bombs and stuff. Now, we know that it's possible to have a war. Ireland has proved it. It's possible to put away the guns and negotiate with people and get something better. To say the only way of getting through in this world is for big armed camps to be really, really strong. Geez, I just think that's shameful. And there's Irish politicians pushing like hell to get Ireland, if not into NATO, then certainly into PESCO, and maybe through PESCO and the EU into NATO. It's saying the very opposite of what they always preach to us. Let's see, we're going to settle your differences peacefully, put away the weapons.
But here, Judy, I take it, and I agree with most of it until you reach a certain point. Finland have a 1,300-mile border with Russia. Sweden is right on their doorstep as well. Sweden had what about a 75 year, you need to look it up, neutral stance, even going back even during the Second World War. But suddenly, you can't blame Sweden, you can't blame Finland. Mr. Putin, absolutely, he went into Georgia, he annexed Crimea, and he's invaded Ukraine. If I was sitting there saying, he's brought war onto mainland Europe, as it were. I don't know if you'd call it mainland Europe, but it's part of Europe anyway. But it brought war onto Europe again. And Jude, the only person responsible for invading Ukraine is the Russians.
I would agree. He didn't have to
right. What are this? And the reason in Ukraine is because they are not part of NATO. I don't think if they were the old NATO one is the Three Musketeers, one and all in. Sweden are saying, Jude, to use your own analogy, I've seen bullies. They're usually bullies, and when I was at school, there's one guy and he's probably got two mates, and they pick off usually the weakest they can find. So if there's two or three guys getting beaten up but suddenly they join a gang, and they maybe the other ones aren't the strongest, but collectively they are.
But
what choice does Sweden and Finland are right up against Russia's doors? Ireland doesn't have to get right up right this way.
Well, fair enough. But I think we'll come back to this thing, is the analogy of Putin with the bully. That simple, and it's not that simple. Second thing is, a bully will pick out anybody and beat the crap out of them. They try to tell us that this is like the Nazis, that they want to conquer one bit and then another bit and another bit and another bit. I don't think Putin has those ambitions. I think he has
Dr. Collins, he's on the record as saying that. He's on the record as saying that Russia's sort of capitulation to the West during Gorbachev. At one stage, the world feared Russia. Now its power was taken for granted. So now, and that rambling speech he made for about 2 hours a couple of months ago, there was all sorts of reference to. Now, I'm not saying it was hard and fast, but there was a sort of harking back to the good old days.
I know, yeah, but I mean, that's what you do. You look to the time when things were really great, make you the US great, make America great again and all that stuff. But I still don't think that you can assume that he would be gung-ho for going into Sweden or going into Finland.
Yeah, but here's the point. But Dr. Constable, here's the thing was, Ukraine, 43 million people had an election about, I think it's 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
80% of them voted for Zelensky, and they voted to look west. It was a democratic decision, and so on. Whatever.
It was, but
they didn't say they were joining NATO. They didn't say, but they wanted to look west. Putin decided that that's not good enough, and so on. Now, the rights of self-determination for 44 million people also has to be taken into account.
But don't forget, we started off talking about Finland and Sweden. And I'm saying Finland and Sweden would not be targets for Putin. Putin has had a bad experience.
With respect, you cannot say that, Dr. Collins. You cannot.
Why not? Why not, Editor McArt?
Because he's been Jesus, Jude. He's not. This is his second invasion, and he's in the space of about 10 years.
Yeah, but it's a bit complicated, that, isn't it? The spheres of influence, and B, the fact that there's a lot of Russians in both those places.
But like, if I was in Finland, particularly more so than Sweden, I'd be sort of nervous because there was. By the way, can we talk before that fabulous funeral on Israel before we go?
Yeah. We better start talking about it right now. Anyway, I think I'd be worried that Ireland will be press ganged into joining NATO. That'd be bad news. Right, we've got less than a minute and a half, and you want to talk about that journalist.
I had a sort of a bug over, as I was saying earlier, on Friday, and I sat watching TV. It didn't move out, and I just came on Sky News, and there was the funeral of the Al Jazeera journalist Shireen. I wrote her down, Abu Akleh. So on a Friday, and I was just watch the headlines, and Sky News, unbelievably, actually started with this.
You have to make it quite quickly, Pat.
There's really police knocking the crap out of the mourners. Now, today, the Patriarch of Jerusalem, Pier Battista Pizzabella, the Catholic primate there, Patriarch, has issued an unbelievably strong statement condemning the Israelis. So it wasn't a good week for the Israelis. But by the way, they were supposed to be responsible for executing the woman, and then they attacked the funeral.
Yeah. Oh, it was reminiscent of scenes
how did the Israelis get away with it?
But it's the same way the Brits got away with it here. We've seen coffins upended and so on. We're in the last moments. The last thing I'll say is this: don't let's have hierarchy of victims or deaths. There's Palestinian kids being killed day after day after day. And now we have this woman, and you don't want to see a journalist killed, but it is another life. All of those lives are equally valuable. Okay, that's a rather noble sentiment in which to conclude. Thank you, Pat.
All the best,
Look after your health.